Good day, madam. My name is NAZURAH binti ISHAK from the program PDPP KDC TESOL B June 2021 intake. Today, I'll be presenting my oral presentation for the subject TSLB 2092 English Grammar for the Language Teacher. Thank you, Nur Najwa Shuhada binti Abu Bakar and Hasnizam bin Hamdan, for explaining the definition for teachers' beliefs as well as learners' needs. As for my part, I will explain to you, madam, the importance of knowing learners' needs and perhaps how to mitigate the problem of teachers' beliefs versus learners' needs. Now, before I get into my actual points, let me just share with you what I have found on the internet from Google Scholar, of course. This is a work published in 1999 by Ecclestone. The title of the journal article is Care or Control? Defining Learners' Needs for Lifelong Learning. So, whether care or control is more important in defining learners' needs in terms of lifelong learning. And why I actually presented this to you, even though it was published in 1999, over than a few decades ago, is because I feel that this is still relevant in this day and age, especially in this competitive technological era where it's just where everybody is in a competition with one another, it feels like. So it says here, point number one, new discourses in lifelong learning emphasize social inclusion and people's ability to survive in a ruthless global economy. So back then, the classroom setting was the focus of the classroom setting of school was to produce students whereby they would be able to survive the ruthless global economy after they have graduated. And look at the second point, outside a consensus which links individuals' skills and motivation with economic survival and social cohesion through ideas of human capital. There are fears that instrumental curricula reinforce compliance with the prevailing demands of this capital, human capital. Other critics object to making learners pay for their fate whilst having to be committed to learning for the sake of their employers. Okay, and also this is taken from Ecclestone 1999 as well. So basically, learners learn not because for their own needs, but because for the sake of their employers. This resonates with me so much as a teacher. It actually reminds me of how I used to teach at the initial part of my teaching journey, whereby I truly believe that the only way for pupils to be able to learn English is by teacher modeling, basically by me speaking in English 100% during lessons, and that I believe that I shouldn't at all use the mother tongue in the classroom to for whatever reason. And based from what I've experienced is that might not necessarily be good for my children, for my pupils, because their needs might be different and they might not understand where I'm coming from and why I'm not giving in to them and their needs. I fail to take into consideration their backgrounds, their socioeconomic status, their prior knowledge, and their cultural heritage, and how that might have affected the way they learned English, which, although English is taught as a second language in Malaysia, it might actually be a foreign language to some of these pupils. And I failed to take that into consideration. I remember that me speaking only in English back then may have somewhat created a wall between me and my pupils because they perceived me as foreign. They couldn't really relate to me. So sometimes I would throw. So after having noticed this, I tried throwing jokes every now and then in my mother tongue to during lessons to somehow bridge that gap between me and my pupils so that I would seem relatable to them. Or I might discuss with them in English, of course, about a topic that they can definitely relate to. So basically, I use the English language to discuss a topic that is that hit close to them. So that was one of my ways in trying to break that wall between me and my pupils, so as to create a safe space for them in order to cater to their needs. So basically, my trying to teach my pupils English by speaking English 100% during lessons had made my children not being able to connect with me. And because of that, they didn't enjoy their time with me in during lessons, which subsequently didn't at all help them improve their English because they didn't feel as if they belong in the classroom setting for as long as I am in there with them. Now, although the definition for learners' needs are somewhat vague, however, we can always refer back to the literature to find a common ground. And as has been presented by my groupmate earlier, learners' needs are indeed important in the language classroom as well as teachers' beliefs, and that there's a way to mitigate the problem of teachers' beliefs versus learners' needs by meeting each other halfway, I believe. Here, number 4, it says needs are any language elements or skills that would be harmful if missing. This is the direction of my presentation, which I'll touch on later, as I have to relate this presentation to what I did in my teaching kit for the subject TSLB 2102R, Developing Language Through Language Arts with Dr. Munira. Now, despite the fact that I believe in students, learners' needs, I also do believe in the stand of teachers' beliefs, whereby teachers have to have their own opinion when it comes to teaching in the classroom and when it comes to teaching in general. Because based on this belief is where the direction of the classroom instructions will go to. So I believe that it is important for teachers to have their own beliefs. The problem is only when teachers only take into consideration their beliefs and completely deny learners' needs. That is where the problems arise. Consequently, if teachers' beliefs influence students' teachers' teaching, and therefore these teachers' students' opportunities to learn, then beliefs should be a central concern of teaching and teacher education, as stated here in this article taken from the VIN 2014. So I do believe that there is that teachers' beliefs are important, but I also believe that learners' needs are equally important. This is an article taken from Refs 2001. Mind you, although it was published in 2001, I still do very much believe that this is still relevant in this day and age. It's stated here, when pupils are successful in achieving intended goals or objectives, okay, whatever those goals and objectives are, that success is often attributed to one of the following sources, just one. Which do you believe is the most powerful determinant of success? Circle the letter of your choice. So there are six choices, okay, six opinions. Um, the first one is pupil home background, pupil intellectual ability, pupil enthusiasm or perseverance, I mean. The fourth one is teacher attention to pupil interests and abilities, teacher use of effective teaching methods, and lastly, teacher enthusiasm and perseverance. So, and here it says, which do you believe is the most powerful determinant of success? Circle the letter of your choice, and you can only choose one, because it says here that success is often attributed to one of the following sources. So out of the six, which do you think is most powerful in determining students' success in the classroom? To me, I don't believe that there can only be one of these. I believe that all six of these are important in determining pupils' success or learners' success in the classroom and in meeting their needs and also in meeting teachers' beliefs. I feel that we can always reach a middle ground whereby it's not about teachers' beliefs versus students' needs, but that we can always meet halfway and try to mitigate this problem by meeting each other halfway. So I believe one of the ways of meeting each other halfway um, is by looking into all six determinant of success here, and not just focusing on one or two, no, but taking into consideration of all six determinant of success when it comes to pupils' successful learning. So this is an excerpt taken from Ainsley, 1994. Again, although it's been over a few decades now since this work was published, I do believe that it is indeed still relevant in this day and age. Basically, the research article is titled Mixed Ability Teaching, Meeting Learners' Needs. So it's about how to navigate a classroom full of pupils from different backgrounds and different proficiency levels. So it says here the specific linguistic needs of the learners may also be very varied, and I agree. It says here needs are not only linguistic, students also have psychological and social needs, which will vary from one individual to another. If students have joined the class because they want to make new friends, opportunities must be created for them to get to know their fellow students. A group that is socially successful is likely to achieve more linguistically than might originally have been expected. Learners need to feel emotionally at ease in the language learning environment. The teacher must ensure that they do not, for example, okay, it's not included here, but I'll just read the text for you. The teacher must ensure that they do not, for example, feel fear at the prospect of speaking in front of the class. This aspect of mixed ability is considered in more. Yes, so you can read that if you would like to. You can just easily find this from the internet. So basically, this excerpt discusses learners' needs in terms of their psychological and social needs as well. So I think as teachers, we have to take that into consideration, that it's not just what is it that we want the students to achieve here in terms of what's written in the DSKP and what is required of them as stated in the syllabus. No, I feel that as teachers, you have to fully understand their needs. And by that, you have to look into their psychological and social needs as well. What is it that they're looking for from this lesson of yours? Because believe it or not, different students have different motivations. They do, just as we adults do. We believe in different things, therefore uh, we we get motivated differently, and we have different psychological and social needs. Therefore, when it comes to teaching young learners, very young learners, you have to take all these into consideration, because you have to understand that young learners, they do not have the ability to express themselves well. I'm sure you agree with me on that, madam, as we have been there ourselves. We have been young learners before, and we weren't able to fully express ourselves. In fact, we were very scared to express ourselves to our teachers in the classroom, which back then was considered as the authority in the classroom. You can never say no to your teacher. It's considered rude. So in this day and age, I hope that there has been a change in terms of that, a student teacher dynamic. I wouldn't want my pupils to be scared of me as a teacher. I would want them to belong, to feel safe in my classroom. So in order for me to be able to do that is by getting to know them, okay? By getting to know them personally and understanding their linguistic needs as well as psychological and social needs. Okay, if you were to look at the dialogue box, it says, the need for foreign language is extremely diversified depending on the country, class, age, and occupation of the learner, as well as on the language required, the situations and conditions of use, and the kind of knowledge and balance of skills that the learner will need to be able to bring into action. And I do agree with this. So, in my classroom, for example, in my school, most of the pupils come from a low economic status, most of them. Only a few come from well-to-do families or comfortable families, as I would say. So you have to understand that when different students, different pupils who come from different socioeconomic status will have different goals and different objectives in life, as well as in their academic journey. So you, as a teacher, instead of putting down that child for wanting differently than the rest of their peers, you should instead motivate them, allow them to reach that goal of theirs, and try to understand where they are coming from. Let me give you an example. A child who comes from an extremely poor family might not even see the need to do well in school as important. That child will only think of wanting to survive. How do I want to survive in this cruel and trying world? How do I want to survive this? Is by, at least is by having survival skills. For example, how to make money, maybe not make money like becoming a CEO and all those, but how to make money just to be able to uh, afford rent, for example, afford a decent car and feed their families, for example. So you have to look at the child's needs in terms of this, for example, and there, aside from the linguistic needs as well as psychological needs. This is also taken from Einstein, 1994. These are the key areas that teachers should take into consideration when it comes to teaching pupils from various different backgrounds. There are 7 different key areas, namely motivation, interests, and needs. Number 1, linguistic ability, general education background, learning style. Number 4. Number 5, age. Number 6, external pressures and time available to study. And number 6, anxiety. So it's important to know a learner's motivation, interests, and needs so that you can cater your lesson to meet that student's motivation, interests, and needs so that that student or that pupil remains interested to learn during your classroom, during your lesson, to learn with you. Second, linguistic ability. You have to understand the pupil's linguistic ability, the learner's linguistic ability, whether this learner is a high achiever or a low achiever or intermediate. So you have to know his or her linguistic ability before you're able to navigate further in your lessons with this particular kid, not with this particular learner, and not just one learner. Of course, I'm talking about all your pupils or students. And then, as it says here, some students are better language learners than others, which I agree, and some may not be as much as a good language learners. So, and previous language learning experience will have varied considerably. I agree. How they were raised, or did they receive any previous training or education before coming to school, for example? Of course, that will set them at a different starting point in terms of linguistic ability. Number three, general educational background. Was it a positive or negative experience previously? Because if they previously they had a negative in general education background, that might have influenced them to think negatively of your lesson as well. That might bring a negative impact to how this particular learner might view me as a teacher. So how long did it last? Did the students acquire any study skills, etc.? Okay. And then number four, learning style. Okay, learning style. If we are to talk about learning style, we're very much familiar with VARK's learning style: visual, auditory, read and write, and then kinesthetic. Okay, or perhaps a combination of all four, or a few of these learning styles. So students learn in different ways, which I agree as well, as I am more of a kinesthetic and auditory, a visual learner. So whenever I learn, I would prefer to use videos. So you have to understand your pupils' learning styles, as learning styles may vary greatly from one student to another. So you have to cater to each if you can. If it's possible, you have to try to cater to each pupil's learning style. And then age is one ever to rest. Age, of course. So when you're dealing with very young kids, they're more susceptible to damage, if that makes sense. They're more susceptible to damage, and by that I mean they're very impressionable. Whatever that you say or do in the classroom might have a long lasting impact on them even when they enter adulthood. And that is something that every teacher should take into consideration before you say or do anything with your pupils whom are very young. Okay, because these are impressionable children, and we have to be very careful with the words that we choose to use in the classroom. Okay, and then the next point is external pressures and time available to study. Like I said, you have to look into, for an example, you have to look into every pupil's socioeconomic status, as sometimes those who come from lower socioeconomic status might not have the time available to study when they're at home, because sometimes these are the some of the cases with my pupils, that when they're at home, they actually have to help the mother or father selling kueh, for example, by the roadside. Therefore, they don't have the time to study at home. And they might even come to school not having done anything from the previous lesson. So for teachers who know, the story of these pupils, it's it's needed, because that these students, these pupils didn't do their work not because they're lazy, but because of what's going on at home. So therefore, you have to provide them a safe space, okay, for them to study, and maybe provide them some extra time, give them some extra time and attention at school, because they don't have that time and attention at home. And lastly, anxiety. So lack of confidence and nervousness can hinder progress, which I agree. I've heard from my own peers, from my own peer, uh, from this PDPP program, that she has a student of an orang asli student pupil, and she did say that this orang asli pupil seemed to be lacking confidence. And when you know that a student lack confidence, you don't humiliate them more, and you don't do things. You might not have the intention to humiliate this particular pupil, but sometimes you do things that you think is okay, but actually humiliates the student more, which will in turn have them lacking in self-confidence even more. So we don't want to do that. We want to avoid that. So you have to try to really understand your pupils and work with them based on their level of confidence. In summary, learners' needs are important because, number one, it provides them the feeling of safety of being in a classroom. Okay, so when they feel safe, they feel they are more likely to do well in your lesson, okay, during your lesson in your classroom. Second, it gives them room to acquire knowledge at their own pace. Number three, it provides them the understanding of themselves as language learners, okay, in terms of language styles, language learning strategies, for example, okay, LLS, language areas that need improvement, etc., whether it be in terms of vocabulary or grammar, for example. And then number four, it helps these learners to shape their individuality. It's very important that we cater to learners' individualities. And by that, I mean to their strengths, okay? We cater to their strengths and also their weaknesses. We understand that these might not be their interest, therefore we don't push them to like a certain something or a certain topic or whatever it is. And lastly, it provides them this sense of belonging. Okay, so they feel safe, they feel belong in that classroom. And when they feel belong, they will more likely do well in their academic journey as well. So now how do I relate this? To what to my the teaching kit that I did for TSLB 2102R, Developing Language Through Language Arts with Dr. Munira. I did a teaching kit using a read aloud storybook on YouTube, which focuses on the teaching and learning of superlative adjectives, using a book that is creative and imaginative, which fits the theme world of stories. Now, how is this relevant with my pupils? As we're striving in trying times, as we're living through the pandemic COVID-19, I feel that I should be able to give them somewhat of a break from the seriousness of it all. So I chose a material that, although it's teaching them superlative adjectives, but the material actually seemed fun and otherworldly, which I hope could have given them a sense of happiness. And with that, I thank you.